Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and asks, can he guarantee that no prisoners taken in operations involving the New Zealand Special Air Service in Afghanistan were transferred to the National Directorate of Security in Kabul and tortured?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Following the decision to redeploy the Special Air Service to Kabul, the Government completed discussions with the Government of Afghanistan to establish an agreement regarding the treatment of detainees transferred by the New Zealand SAS forces to Afghan authorities. An agreement was signed between the two governments requiring that such detainees should be handled in accordance with applicable international and domestic law, and that their treatment should be subject to the full scrutiny of the International Committee for the Red Cross and other relevant organisations. To date, no detainees have been transferred by the SAS to Afghan authorities. That is a reflection of the mentoring and support role played by the SAS in relation to the crisis response unit of the Afghan National Police. The welfare of detainees captured directly by Afghan authorities or transferred to them by other forces is a matter for which others might properly be held to account.
Dr Russell Norman.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order.
The question was specifically about joint operations, where the SAS was involved in joint operations with the Afghan forces, and can he provide a guarantee that in that situation that these weren't transferred to the Directorate and then people were tortured? He talked about the agreement, which was fine, and he talked about where the SAS directly captured people, but he didn't address the joint activities question.
Well, Order, I thought the Minister gave a pretty comprehensive reply. The member's got several more supplementary questions, and that's a classic example of how a supplementary question could be framed to ask specifically that question rather than try and do it by way of point of order. I think the member's being a bit unreasonable. Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Is the Minister saying that he cannot rule out that prisoners taken in joint operations involving New Zealand forces went on to suffer torture, including amputations, electric shocks, starvation, beatings and burns, as outlined in the London High Court?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Mr Speaker, what I'm saying to the House is that the Government takes direct responsibility for the detainees that are transferred by New Zealand forces. The welfare of detainees captured directly by Afghan authorities or transferred to them by other forces is a matter for which others might be properly held to account.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Therefore, does he agree with the Prime Minister's comment that when the SAS is involved in joint operations with Afghan forces, quote, it is not our responsibility when it comes to those people who are detained, end quote?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Speaker, I accept that New Zealand has responsibility to ensure appropriate treatment of detainees transferred to Afghan authorities by our forces. I even accept that we should make relevant inquiries about the position of detainees held after an operation in which we have played a part. That is what we are doing currently in relation to the matters raised by the member. But can I suggest to the member that for New Zealand to be accountable for the welfare of every detainee held as a result of all of the operations by the many forces in Afghanistan is a rather greater responsibility than we should carry?
Dr Russell Norman.
Does he agree that the government's attitude is effectively one of looking the other way while Afghan forces take prisoners off to be tortured, prisoners that New Zealand forces help to place into captivity?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
Speaker, I make it very clear that when New Zealand transfers detainees to Afghan authorities, we take responsibility for ensuring that appropriate steps are taken in relation to their welfare. I even accept that we should make relevant inquiries about detainees held after an operation in which we have been involved. The New Zealand Government is currently involved in making such relevant inquiries.
Dr Russell Norman.
In the number of years that New Zealand has been involved in joint activities, the SAS involved in joint activities with Afghan forces, how many inquiries has the government made as to the well-being of prisoners that were captured by Afghan forces in these joint operations and transferred to the Security Directorate?
The Honourable Murray McCully.
The member may well be aware that there were 3 deployments of the SAS under the time of the previous administration, and the current government has deployed them again in October of last year. If he was wishing me to give a comprehensive answer in relation to all of those deployments, he would need to give me notice of that question.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Will New Zealand follow the lead of British forces whereby there is a ban on transferring prisoners to the National Directorate of Security in Kabul due to the risk that they would be subjected to torture, including amputation, electric shocks, starvation, sleep deprivation, beatings and burns?
The Honourable Murray McCulley.
Speaker, I am advised that the British authorities have suspended the transfer of detainees to the National Directorate of Security. The advice I've received is that this suspension occurred because of concerns regarding access for officials to detainees that were held there. If the member feels that that advice invites further scrutiny, then I would agree with them, and I am subjecting that response from officials to such further scrutiny.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Does he think that it is acceptable for New Zealand soldiers to be risking their lives to prop up an Afghan government which all the evidence from British courts, from British governments, from Amnesty International shows it is a government that routinely tortures its citizens?
The Honourable Murray McCulley.
Speaker, I think it is fair to say that the government does understand that there are some shortcomings in relation to the operation of the Afghan government. We are given from time to time the opportunity to express those views directly to President Karzai and to his ministers. I have done so personally on more than one occasion and will continue to do so.
Question number 9, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker,